So let me ask you this. My guys are all getting faster. This has been a summer of speed for us. Like we are getting faster. But what I'm noticing is we can't hit our 2.2 meters per second on the squat right now. Like our squat is going down for the meters per second and how much. Now, granted, our our eccentric speed is accelerating. It's getting a little higher, but we can't seem to, even if we drop down low, we have guys that can't seem to hit 2.2 meters per second. So I'm also looking at it, I'm like, you know what? Our first step isn't 2.2 meters per second anyway. Fuck it. Like right now, your first step is 1.8 meters per second. Well, let's just train the fuck out of 1.9 meters per second or 2.0 meters per second and get as much weight as we possibly can in that range. But I don't understand why. It could be like an error in the unit. It could be a lot of things, but why would that occur? Because we're doing nothing but speed work. And so, by the way, check this contrast set out. So we essentially do, for our main exercises, we do 3 contrast sets for the sprints: weighted, half weighted, unweighted. And we do that until they start getting fatigued. Some guys will do 2. Mostly we only get 2 or 3 sets, 2 or 3 rounds, which comes out to be about 15 sprints or so, which is a ton of yards for these guys, but still. Then after that, we go to, for the guys that can do it, we'll do a 2.2 meter per second squat, and then we'll do an approach vertical jump with an approach so there's more elastic to it, and then we'll do pogos, and then we'll do the Kaiser runner, the air runner, where we'll hit sets of 5, max power, max wattage, and then we'll do an approach with a single leg jump, and then we'll do assisted single leg pogos. So like, there's no rhyme or reason why these guys should be moving slower. All we're doing is speed. All we're doing is speed work. Why are these numbers? But now their sprinting it's working for sprinting. It's absolutely working for sprinting. And their squat numbers are 1.4 meters per second squats are through the roof. Like I have guys that are squatting 500 pounds, belt squat, but moving the house. But the 2.2s are plateauing and like actually going down there. They can't hit the 2.2s, even with lighter weight. Why is that? Why would you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do a lot of contrasts. So one of the reasons I do contrasts is I tend to, and this again, I go a lot of what I do session to session. I mean, I'll have the session worked out what I want to do, and within a week or a 6-week block. But the weights I'll use, they can differ, but depending on if I'm standing in front of the athlete and what I see, my gut will tell me, no, we need to do that. And what I've found is that I seem to be sort of grouping things together. So, for example, if we look at a box squat, I'll have things which I might call strength training, and they will be sort of in the 270 millisecond, 300 millisecond range. And then I've got power, and they will be sort of in the 170 to 220 bracket.
And you're just doing TPV then?
What's that?
You're just basing it off TPV.
Well, this is what I've seen when I look at TPV, but I haven't actually based it off that. I've based it off gut feeling that this is what we need to do. So it's more that I've looked at sort of the accumulation intensification principle, and I'm looking at, okay, so I'm accumulating and I'm intensifying, but I need to sort of pull this intensification out a little bit. So I've tended to see that when I do things, it actually ends up being like the set we did today with the step ups, that we'll have 3 types of setups, which are set up for different angles, because that's the angles that we're going to come out and we're going to run in the first 60 meters. They're exactly the same angles as the first 60 meters. So we'll do the first set as they are in the blocks, and the first 2-3 steps the 20 centimeters, we're out 6, 7, 8 steps, and then 10 centimeters, you're virtually at sort of that position when you've got hip flexion and knee flexion. So what seems to happen is I tend to gravitate towards that in other lifts like cleans, for example. And then when I then look at the measurements, what I do, then I've found that I get these clusters, which are very, very sort of grouped together. Like, okay, so this was an accumulation session, okay? In that accumulation week, those 2 weeks, and I can see that I'm doing that, okay? Then I see the next phase, now it's power, and then it's speed, because speed is even faster. And it's interesting that it's gravitating towards there, more or less. I don't know if it's the right word, but generically, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes that. So, what I kind of got out of that was my guys just aren't recovering properly.
I was about to say, it could be also that they're not recovering. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier, what Randy hit me with a couple of days ago made me really wonder, because Kenneth and I have been looking at this for a couple of years. Now, we do things as you know, we do things differently than what a certain company tells their customers to do when you're doing overspeed. We do it differently. And the reason why we do that is because we are trying to find the elastic threshold. So in other words, how fast can I pull this guy with X amount of force, but with X amount of velocity? So that's the deciding factor, the velocity, not the force. That's completely irrelevant. It's the velocity. So we say, for example, now we know we can pull him at 11.4 meters per second. Okay, good. So now we know that we're running, that's the elastic threshold. But do we know the elastic threshold in the gym? No. That's where EA index comes into it. So Randy's been thinking, because what we've seen is if you do, for example, EA index is peak velocity divided by time to peak velocity. So if you go from, let's say, we take a clean, for example, a hang clean, you go 100, 80, 190, 80, 70, 60 kilos. What's going to happen? You're going to have big numbers at the start, and then they're going to drop as velocity increases, but the load is less. You're going to get less EA index. The value of EA index actually drops. But now comes the fun part. In that sequence, or if it's the other way around, if you start at 60 kilos and go to 100 kilos, it's increasing the EA index. But in that sequence, there is, just like when we're pulling you on the track, there is an elastic threshold. In every one of these fast dynamic lifts, there is an elastic threshold.
So what, in order to track that, you'd have to track the mass as well, right? You have to, yeah.
And this is, you know, and what Randy said there, Kenneth and I have we've spent 2 days, we've been racking our brains, and Kenneth's got all these data that we've done with lots and lots of tests and jumps and all sorts of things. And we're just crunching numbers and looking at different data that we've done, you know, throughout the years. And there seems to be, what Randy has sort of looked at is, it's starting to make a lot of sense. In other words, every athlete, depending on his strength level, his maximum strength level and his power levels, will have a weight where things just click. In other words, this is where his optimum power, speed, and elasticity. And that's the weight back and forth there. That's where we want to be. Let's say that it's 70 kilos for somebody. But if we're loading him at 100 kilos, and he can get that up, but is that helping him at all?
Yeah. And it's just not exactly. So exactly. Yes.
So in other words, the range that we can get optimum out of his training, it might be from 70 kilos, from 60 to 70, and from 70 to 80. And doing 90 or 100 He's not ready for that. In other words, this is something that might take 2 or 3 years to get to, depending on the event. So in other words, are we doing a lot of athletes disservice and they're going to plateau because we're way too eager to build up strength levels
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this is what we've always been taught, that this is, stronger is better and blah, blah, blah. But it's not. It's how fast the central nervous system can actually accentuate and utilize, what you're doing within a movement in your given.
It's stimulation, adaptation, stabilization, right? Actualization. Um, and this is something where I suppose I've unintentionally been very, very good at, where I will not move on from an exercise until they're competent in what I have judged as the prerequisite, right? So for years, I'd have guys just jumping and landing before even having them do depth jumps or whatever the hell it is, or they're stuck doing depth jumps until they start doing rebounds, and they need to be very, very competent in depth jumps before they could even consider doing any kind of rebounds. That's one thing that I've actually, because it's why are we gonna move on because you fucking suck at this?
Randy said that. I think he said he summed it up pretty well when I don't know if it was in the thing he did with Altus, but he says, if I'm guilty of anything, it's of undertraining people. In other words, I'm very conservative because we've both got, and I think I have it because of the fact that I was an athlete and I had 9 operations. And I know how frustrating it is mentally to stand there at the sideline and, watch everything just flap by. So I've always had this thing about keep my athletes healthy.
Yeah.
Keep them bloody well healthy. And that means that I haven't overworked them. So they haven't sort of hit walls where they all of a sudden, nothing happens. And if you look at when I went to Hong Kong, bang, now they're back doing the grind and they're back doing the same results they did for 3 years. It took 1 year, and that everything that I undid, they redid again, and they're back, shithole again. So the body adapts very, very quickly to whatever stimulus you give it. So I think this is the one of the keys, I think, is to make sure that the central nervous system is able to recover.
Yeah, sometimes you just got you're just trying to fit 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. Like, I only have so much time with these guys, and I have to fucking accomplish so much that it fucking sucks.
It's been, for me, I'm always trying to learn things, and it's been, I mean, maybe Alex doesn't think I've sort of dawdled around his place now for a bunch of weeks, and I watch these hockey players come in and out, and these guys work very, very hard, and this place has got the nickname the sweatshop. So in other words, you don't come in here and walk out, looking like you've just come out of the Club Med. It's these guys are drenched. So there is, and this is, but it's sensible, but they're doing a lot of hard work. But at the same time, the interesting thing that I'm looking at here is, if I was to do this with my guys, not the fact that they're sprinters, but I have other, I've had other guys who will be decathletes who have got to work for 2 days and 10 events spread over 2 days. So work capacity is very important. And I've worked with hockey players like in Sweden as well. But there is a mindset. Now, if Alex was to give them more training that would more replicate what I'm doing as far as recovery-wise, these guys would freak out. The Chinese freaked out when Randy started giving them 6-9 minutes between sets because they were used to having 30-40 seconds.
So to another variant of that, it's a different type of work. Like the grinding out that decathletes have to do versus the grinding out that a hockey player or a football player has to do in camp. Fuck, you can't compare the two. The volume, the tonnage, the impacts. Like, again, it's comparing like rock climbing to ballet. You know what I mean? Like it's just completely different. Like it's routine car crashes And
Yeah.
our guys, I don't think, because my guys aren't responding to my high performance outlook on this quarter the way that I thought they would, but they're responding well. But it's because they're grinders and they're tough and they're brutes, and that's what their sport requires is a lot of fucking work. Whereas you can't, I mean, it's like driving a Camry versus a Ferrari, you know? Like you can't drive the Ferrari around town like all day, every day, and just take them to a regular shop for an oil change. Like it's very, very like the high performance aspect that you deal with in its absolute form. Like my variation, a team sport high performance versus track and field high performance are two different high performance. It's
Yeah,
it's
I would say I use it because I'm a big car fan. I usually say that what I do with the events that I do is Formula One, and a lot of the team sports and so forth is more like cars. Well, yeah, some of the bumper cars, but I would say rally driving. You still go,
yeah.
but you're going to take some hits and turns, and there's going to be some damage, and you might have to stop halfway on one of the special stages and get the sledgehammer out and bang out a few panels and everything, and then away you go again.
Couple of
In
e-brake
my
turns here and there.
Yeah, in Formula One that doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah,
Go out,
it's your
go out
track
and
and
bang.
field is the purest form of movement where it's like team sports is it's the combination of everything. In my opinion, the most well-rounded movers on the planet, the best at being average, the best, the fastest average movers. You know what I mean? Like that's what it is. Where Brooker,
Okay, so let me ask you a question. We left the notion of looking at averages when it comes to what we're doing in the gym for 20 years ago, because it averages for us is like, yeah, okay, well that's interesting, but we're trying to run as fast as possible or throw a javelin 100 meters. Averages, they suck. So in other words, we're peak values. Now the question is it as important for you guys to look at peak values, or should you guys actually be looking maybe more towards, let's say, if it's 100%, I'm at 100% at peak values. Maybe you guys need to be 70-30.
so yeah, and I've always said, what good is running a 4.340 if you pull your hamstring every time you do it? I'd rather run 24 fives
Yeah.
all day, every day. And I'll coach the 4.5 guy all day, every day. And he'll play versus your 4.5 guy, your 4.3 guy.
Yeah, but then you've got the problem. Yeah, I agree with that. But then you've got the problem when they go to the combine, unless they run a fucking fast 40, like, sorry, mate, you ain't getting a contract. See you later.
Which is why it's fucking stupid and I don't train combine guys for legitimately that reason, because
Yeah.
it's not an accurate representation of
No.
of what needs to be done. And on top of it too, so I have a guy right now that I am training for a workout, a pro workout, because he didn't go to the combine because he had the sesamoidectomy. He's very, very good. In my opinion, he'll be in the NFL for 5-10 years. But we're trying to sit on two horses with one ass right now because I need to prep him for camp because he can get the fuck beat out of him. But I have to prep him for a 40. And that's different. Like this guy will never be at the angles for the 40-yard dash that he will in camp. You know what I mean? Like it's two different angles. It's the velocities will be similar, but like if he ever has a breakaway, he's still lateral. Like no one's perfect form running. You have a fucking helmet on and shoulder pads and a ball in your fucking hand. It's substantially different. And like, bro, like it's there's a lot of different variables you need to worry about. Like you're worried about getting hit, so you're really never going to hit true top speed type elasticity when you're running like that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the problem with that. This guy's got the problem with not only has to deal with that, but he's got 20 guys who weigh 300 pounds, which want to belt the shit out of him.
Yeah. So like it's to compare the 40 and to
Yeah.
compare even special teams to running a 40, it's not the same thing. It's and training, the purest aspect of sprinting, like a 40-60 meter, you know what I mean? Like that's top speed, or that's pure acceleration, as fast as you possibly can, as quickly as you can.
Like I said in the beginning, that wouldn't it make more sense then for team sports that you have a general preparation, but then you prepare them a little bit more specific because depending on what position they have on the field.
Absolutely, but camp isn't like that. That's not reality. That would also
Well,
imply some kind of organization on the organization's part.
well, this is exactly. This is the next question. This is the problem because we're stuck in a bit of a like a hamster wheel in that sense that the people who run the organizations, they don't have our background. So in other words, they make decisions depending on completely different variables which don't take into account what we do. And the question is then are these sports evolving from a sporting aspect, or are they evolving as a business aspect? And I don't think
it doesn't matter, because it
they
just
don't,
is what it is, and we need to deal with it. And which is, again, like why I said two horses with one ass. Like, I don't prep these guys for football. I really don't. I prep them for camp. I prep them for the rigors of camp, because I need to make sure that you can have 40 fucking plays in a row and not come off the field and still be moving at a higher average than the guy that you're competing against. Brooker, you've been need to chime in for fucking minutes now. Talk to us.
No, it's easy. My brain's just going. How are you going to taper your guys before camp, considering you don't have much time with them anyway?
So
And then I want to ask Rolf how he's tapering his sprinter, because he's got the Olympics in 3 weeks.
taper, good one. So no, like I have 4 or 5 weeks with my guys, right? I have too much to fucking accomplish. When I see guys start slowing down, I see little things. We take 1 or 2 days off. We don't take week-long deloads. So I undulate the workouts within the week in response to this. So like, hey, we're going light today. Well, how come? I feel fucking great. Yeah. Shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Like we're going like, oh, hey, we'll cut it there. No, I got more in me. I said, I'm well aware. That's why you pay me. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's little things like that I do to taper within the weeks, so we can continue to move forward. It's because I don't have that luxury of, oh, we have a 1 week deload, a week long deload this week, because I only have 5 weeks with you and we have too much to accomplish. Like, maybe I'll say, hey, listen, we're going to do a big needle session today, or a big body work session today. So like, we got to take the next 2 days light, and we'll just do tempos, and that's how I'll work with it. But it'll be within the week that we'll have to do these. And it's every week we have to do it. That's why I have the big days on Mondays and Fridays, because you can't do Monday, Wednesday, Friday as big days, because it's just too fucking much for these guys. Like, they don't recover.
Yeah.
What do you do? Talk to me, Brooker.
I mean, usually my guys all want to go on holiday the week before camp starts. So I just train them hard till then. I mean, this whole summer, I've had to send a couple guys home, like in a session, like, you look like shit, just go home. It's not even worth you being here. Otherwise, I do what you do. I just cut things short, and I haven't deloaded at all. And it's gone all right. Sometimes they're a bit in a funk, but then we take it easier for a couple of days and then they're good. But I'm curious how you're going to go about now, because you've got how many weeks now? 3 weeks.
About 3 weeks, yeah. I think 6th and 7th of August is 6th is the heat, and then 7th of August is the final, the 4x1.
Right.
Yeah.
So then how many days out are you already tapering now? Because he's competed recently.
No, well, a little bit of both, because they've got to go to Ireland. He flies to Ireland tomorrow, and then they're racing on Friday, and then they race on, 4 days later in London. But then they have virtually 2 weeks before the Olympics starts.
Right.
So what we are going to do, we've lightened things off, is so that psychologically, we don't want them. I don't want him to run slow, but I want him to feel really good in these 2 meets coming up. So
Sure.
we haven't done a taper. We've just we've done more of a accumulation, intensification. In other words, the week in between recovery. So we're utilizing that where, as you know, I cut 50% of the volume.
Yeah.
So we're doing that. But when we get into before the Olympics, then I do a 10-day taper. And the 10-day taper means that about 10 days out, we do a very solid weight session where we really go after it. The volume's not big. We did that session this morning. He had some really good lifts. For example, he did 3 sets of 3 in cleans with 80 kilos, and those 80 kilos, they were moving. I mean, they were really moving. So that tells me that even without tapering, things are, I know that he's in about, if we had good weather at the moment, he'd probably run 10:05, 10:07, somewhere around there. But when we get to the Olympics, then I use a 10 days, and so does Randy. We use a 10-day taper. So that means 10 days out, we do a weight session. And then from there, we taper down, and we utilize that we have 3 track sessions within those 10 days. So the first session will be an acceleration. The second session I use is a max velocity. And the third session will be a speed endurance. And then when that session is done, and the extent of that session depends on, the athlete's event that he's doing. In this case, it's only 100 meter or 120 meters that he's running, because he's running the longest leg. So we know then that we can do a solid session about 4 days out, 3-4 days out, and he'll recover. So that means that we'll do, for example, we might do a 120 and a 70, or a 120, 90. It depends a little bit, how the sessions have gone before that. And then 48 hours out, I usually do a very, very quick explosive upper body session where we're moving things very, very quickly. For example, with some benches, we might do some snatches from hang, very lightweight but very fast. And what that tends to do is it tends to peak the testosterone production 48 hours later. And then that's when we're going to race.
What about in terms of massage, treatment?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I mean, this is where, we're handicapped, because we don't have the resources, for example, that we've had in China, where we've had full-time professionals who follow the guys. So if, for example, in China, we would, after the weight session, for example, we would send the guys to an osteopath. He'd start at their feet and then calcaneus, make sure the calcaneus is not blocked, and then move up the skeleton and make sure that every body part, every joint is moving the way it's supposed to. And then they would use usually tech car treatment, and then some light massage.
I'd really like to intern under an osteopath like that. Like, tell me what good movement is of a calcaneus. You know what I mean? Like, tell me what this stuff to me is so, like, I know how things are supposed to feel and how they're supposed to move for the most part. With a lot of people, like, oh, this just seems locked up. But fuck me, how do you quantify that? And then going head to toe, I'd love to know that shit.
Well, to tell you the truth, this is probably the area that I feel that I'm absolutely a beginner, even though I'm probably not. But compared to the guy that I've worked with in China, Randy, I'm an absolute putz, because he's brilliant at this. And this is, I think, a lot of people don't realise that just how good he is at this. I mean, I've seen some guys that I would say are probably the best physios and osteopaths I've ever seen. And Randy will take them in, and he'll actually just okay, I want this, this, and he'll outline exactly where and what, and he knows exactly each athlete. He knows exactly where their ailments are. Like the calcaneus, I need that tibia, I need this, I need that, I did. And, you know, you just stand there going, right, okay, I need to go back to school. But then I realized that, okay, I'm at the age I am, I can't redo that. So what I do is I adopt the principle of Steve Jobs. You hire people who are smarter than you to do specialist things, and you let them do that. And
Does Randy do the hands-on work himself?
No.
Does he know how?
I wouldn't be surprised if he does, but he doesn't, because he wants other people to do it, because that's their profession, and he wants them to understand that this is how you work with athletes or Formula One.